All right, it is the Matt Mosley Show, and man, I've been waiting on this one. Doug McNamee, Vice President and Director of Athletics, Intercollegiate Athletics at Baylor. Doug, I want to welcome you back officially, and I assume this is the high point so far. Appearing on this show, is that would that be the high point of? I mean, I know there have been some highs already, but where does this rank, would you say?
It's up there. I will say it's probably the only interview that I'll give to a guy who's sending big checks to Texas A&M. So just want to go ahead and put that disclaimer out there that's going to be the one time circumstance.
Yeah. Well, you have little ones, and they're not so little because I actually saw them at the intro, and it won't be that long, and these kids have a mind of their own. So certainly we lost one there, but
very cool.
She still loves Baylor. I'll say that. Awesome. She's always asking me, when can I come to a game? In fact, one of her best buddies from her church youth group is on the Baylor basketball team, Drew Perry. So, yes, we awesome. go to church with them.
Awesome.
Does it still feel a bit surreal, or sort of has the realities kicked in? It was interesting because we had all that, the announcement. It was a big day. A lot of people were there. And I think in our minds, it's just, okay, Doug's going to hit the ground running. And you had to kind of like finish up your other gig and do the whole thing. What's that experience been like? And like, what these, has it been a whirlwind? And I mean, are you just sort of scheduled all day? What are these first days been like?
Yes, to all the above. I would say the biggest challenge for me has just been truly the hours in the day, and trying to get as much done as I possibly can, and also being respectful that it's probably no longer appropriate at midnight to call donors or reach out to other folks that have hopefully shut their phone down and gone to sleep. But it still feels surreal. I would say, even the challenging aspects of the job, I'm excited to get the chance to go do. And I mean that in terms of even in the journey, the 6 weeks thus far that I've been in the mix, or I guess it's 5. You look at the schedule, that normally would be not something I'm super looking forward to. In this moment, in this phase of my life, I'm embracing those moments and excited to get to do them. And I think as far as the timing is concerned, I was announced on the 8th, but you're working before then to reach out to people and to make contact. And really, even though I had to segue out of my old role, I was full speed, almost immediately in terms of trying to get to as many people as I could to try to soak up as much information as possible, because the timing of it has certainly required that. I mean, the portal in football opened on the 2nd. We're in the middle of basketball season. There's a lot of things going throughout the athletic calendar year, but it certainly feels like it's a peak time right now, and it's demanded a lot of attention. But I would say every part of it's been fun. The only challenge for me is finding the hours in the day to get to all the stuff that I want to do.
Now, have you brought in a team of designers, decorators to work on the office? You've got the beautiful BU behind you. Right. The chairs look really, really nice behind you. It looks, I'd like to come in there and maybe have a meeting or two. But have you had any time to put anything up, or is that going to come later?
Yeah, that's later. I mean, I got some pictures that are in locations that need to go up on the wall, but they're not on the wall. It's pretty minimalist in here right now, which is, I think, hopefully the way it sits long term. But that's on the list of maybe once basketball season and portal season wrap, maybe there's some time in June or May we can knock that out.
Yeah. I would go some old school, like Mike Singletary type stuff, maybe some throwback. Now, Doug, do you, the portal, I kind of always wondered about, we experience it through the media, and it's just this constant, and you're on Twitter. I like your Twitter presence. You jumped right in there. I would say the previous AD did not spend a lot of time. Not that you spent a ton of time on there, but I would think probably you believe that social media, some of that is important to get out there. But from a from a portal standpoint,
Mm-hmm.
how do you take that in? And like, are you getting updates from the coaches throughout the day, or are you almost a little bit like us in the respective, like you follow all the on three and 247, and you just see the steady, or Grayson Grunhafer does a really nice job for Sikkim. How do you experience that? Right? And do you ride the fans right now are doing the
Sure.
roller coaster? It's like,
Right.
wait, why is DJ going to,
Right.
what's he doing going to Ole Miss? All that kind of stuff. How do you experience that?
Yeah, I'd say it's kind of in the middle. I mean, I don't want the play-by-play update at the level of detail where there's 200 updates per day in terms of all the different ongoings, but I definitely keep a close pulse, whether that be through Dave or any of the assistants, or Aaron Hunt or Javon, just to see where we're at. And I would say, this is a 14-day window, but it there's a lot of action going on. The volume is significant. This is the previous world, I would say, of high school recruiting was this elongated 3 to 4 year journey that all culminated in that signing day. And I'd say, now the portal has become really what that was before, and compressed in this 14-day period. We've got people taking visits. You now have agents involved, so there's additional levels of conversation, whereas before you might have just been exclusively talking with the athlete and parents. Now you've got athletes, parents, and athletes, parents. You've got agents, and so there's the volume over there is massive, and the amount of visits and just the interactions is significant. And it's an up and down journey. I think there's moments it's kind of like a game where you think you're down, you got work to do, and then you get a good piece of news and you pop back up. And it has a roller coaster approach to it. And I certainly think from a fan's perspective, the drip of information has to be maddening at times. Especially when you don't know what the status of those players are, maybe what their health status is, what the negotiations are behind the scenes as it relates to the rev share component of the deal. There's a lot that's happening, and I think from a fan's perspective, it's great that they care and they're passionate because they want to know what that team looks like in the coming years. But it has definitely become a roller coaster 14 days, and we're obviously at the end of it today with the portal closing.
Some of the players are, they were hoping would come from Kansas State with Joe Klanderman, and I've had Joe on. He was a lot of fun to visit with, but this is a unique situation because you're inheriting kind of a tough situation. You said it yourself. You experience things as a fan. How do you have to kind of represent the Baylor fan base in some sense of understanding their frustration level, while also being supportive and trying to give your coaches, everything you can give them to be successful. I would imagine that's kind of an interesting line to walk a little bit, but it's not hard for you, knowing your personality, to go in there and be kind and be supportive of Dave. I'm curious, like, what's different about Dave than maybe you had in your mind as you were maybe watching a little bit more from afar than you had, obviously it's been 8 years since you were in that building. And so you were kind of watching Dave, like I heard you talking about the other day, and probably left the stadium angry a few times after games, like a lot of fans. How is there anything different about him than maybe you had kind of formed an opinion in your mind? And like, what have those interactions been like with him?
Yeah, I'll hit on that. Let me respond to your question is about Joe real quick, and I'll get to Dave. But you talk about Joe. We've got some guys that he has previously coached that are coming our way. We're really excited about. And I'd say, for him, there's a lot of guys from that Kansas State team that are going elsewhere to some big schools with a lot of attention. And I just want to give credit because he's the guy that coached those guys up. Those weren't 5-star type players coming out of high school. And Joe really deserves a lot of credit for coaching those guys up and getting to the point where they were sought after by a lot of schools. And so really, really excited about him. And I didn't want to let that pass without mentioning kind of the optimism we have with our defense and with Joe's oversight. As far as Dave is concerned, I would tell you my first impressions, a very calculated, deliberate, highly intelligent, very compassionate individual. And I think that I would also say with Dave, it's clear in my mind that he understands the urgency that exists. Nobody is putting more pressure on Dave than Dave's putting on himself. He knows what we need to do and where we need to go. And I would just tell you, and I don't have much to compare to, as you mentioned. I didn't know him personally, prior to for a month ago. But I sense with Dave an optimism, a levity, just I'd say a freeness, which has me encouraged just in terms of how he looks this season and the decisions he's making. I think he's making some hard decisions that were necessary, maybe to some degree overdue. I think in terms of hiring Joe, it's a perfect example of going out and getting somebody really, really talented to offload and delegate the defense to. Retain some coaches. There was some coaches that had opportunities to leave for bigger jobs, and wasn't something we were able to highly publicize. But there were big wins for us on some of the existing coaches. And I think his way he's handled the portal to prepare for the portal, for decisions that have been made to get us ready for the portal, to give us a chance to be successful, has me optimistic. I ultimately we'll find out this fall if we've made the changes necessary to get us to where we expect to be. And that's where the proof will be. Portal season, nobody's getting wins and losses assigned to their record for the portal season. Ultimately will play itself out come August and September into the rest of the fall. But I think he's made the hard decisions that he's needed to do, and that he self-admits was probably overdue to give us the best chance to be most successful. And I would just say there's momentum and there's optimism in that program that I get the sense hasn't been there as much of late.
You were on that committee that helped hire Matt Rule.
Yeah.
You were around for Art Briles era, and how much fun and how unbelievable some of that success was. I have had moments where I've thought, who do I compare Signetti to?
Yeah.
And when you think about what Baylor started doing when y'all brought Art in, it was very Signetti-like. They go about things in a different way, but it was kind of an amazing thing. What I'm wondering is there any you saw how Art and Kim, to another extent, like had this huge connection with like the local fan base, not just us.
Yeah.
I mean, other people got way involved.
Yeah.
Like that would be helpful. I think it's happened with Scott. I think Nikki's really good at that stuff, and it's just going to take time because nobody really wants to follow a legend, and that's what she ended up doing. Dave made an interesting comment. Somebody said, well, can you change? Because his demeanor is so quiet and introspective. And again, I've covered people like Wade Phillips is like, Wade needs to change. That's crazy.
Yeah.
Like you can't change who you are, because then it kind of comes across as fake. So I guess I'm just wondering like how, and maybe not just Dave, maybe it's others, coaches as well. Like what can they do you think to, other than win, to sort of grab that attention of the local fan base and get some of that going again? Because some of that's been lost.
For sure. I think as you think about the teams and the coaches that have been most successful here, I really think they're coaches that have clear identity within their program, and exactly what you're getting. And that it both leads from the style of the play on the field, but just the general vibe and feel around the program. And I think those are the coaches that we found ourselves to be most successful here. And I think, one of the discussions I've had with Dave, and he's in full agreement, is especially over the last, 12 months. And I would say it goes further than that, but I think our program is in need of a more clear identity to know what we're about, specifically what is the DNA of the team, and what are we going to be synonymous with when it comes to our style of play, and what we want to be reflective of is kind of the perception from a team's perspective. And I think that's something that I would say specifically last year that was a little bit of a moving target and probably not as well known. And I want us to have clear identity for who we are as a team. And I think that was something that Dave had the same perspective of as well too. And so I don't want to speak for him as far as what 26 football team will look like, but I would say that there's definitely an expectation for our program to be synonymous with a vibe and a feel, and I think that's where we've seen success with our other sports and coaches specifically in the past. As far as outreach and the connectivity with the Waco community, I think you're accurate. I mean, you spoke about some coaches who were exceptionally talented and relatable to our fans, and I think that goes a long way. I think it's certainly impactful from off the field needs, whether it be fundraising, whether it be, in this new era of NIL, making your program more accessible, humanizing the coaches and the players, I think is a critical skill moving forward. And I would say, I think you're going to see some steps from Dave to do that. Accessibility from a media perspective, not only to him, but I think our assistants and players is something that we've talked about that I believe will be helpful for us and helpful for Dave. Dave's got a personality, and to say, hey, we're gonna try to force a person to change his personality. I think at the end of the day, our fans are going to be most appreciative of us winning football games. And I'd also say this, as it relates to Dave's personality, what I like to remind folks is that stoic nature at the end of the U of H game, where as a fan, I can say this, I wasn't an administrator at the time. I might have had a little bit of opinions as far as a couple of the calls at that point that were went one way that I probably reacted in a little bit more demonstrative way than maybe Dave did on the sidelines, and I think most of our fans did. Dave was the same guy in that game as he was, if you remember that epic moment where McVay made the amazing goal line stand at Oklahoma State, and there's all these images of Dave just being stoic in that moment. At that moment, we loved him. We were like, and this guy has, he's got ice in his veins, and
yes,
we love that vibe, and and so we embraced it. What's the variable here? We were winning in that moment, and now we see him and we think this guy doesn't care, or this guy is not fired up. And I promise you, he's not. He is churning inside and wants to win and putting more pressure on himself and knows the importance of outcomes. Nobody can question that. And I can attest to that in my brief interaction with him. He understands that. But that's the same guy. And I think we just have to understand that expecting him to be, a super emotional, demonstrative person on the side, that's not his vibe and his style. And he's been successful before not doing that. And that's certainly not an objective from my perspective, is to try to dictate a personality. I want to make sure that he has command of his program. He understands what expectations are. He builds a good roster, and he effectively coaches up his team. That's what I think we've got to measure success by.
Isn't it interesting, even sort of out of that context a little bit, that like a guy like Siegmund is almost changed the entire way, and I'm sure administrators feel this too. Like there used to be a thought, get the young up and comer, let's get somebody in their 40s, almost like hiring a pastor, right? We need this guy to grow with the church and all that, to use some of our Baylor stuff.
Sure.
But Siegmund, they hire him from James Madison, and when they made that hire, there's nobody. I mean, I'm sure maybe some insiders thought, well, that guy's been a good coach or something, but for the most part, nobody had a clue, and it was just another guy that's going to lose at Indiana like they have for the last 50 years. And it turns out he's amazing. So I would think, again, you got to kind of, you look around and see what's out there, but don't you feel like, not just you as an athletic director, but others around the country, it's almost that one situation? And I'm sure there's others, guys that are having success like into their 60s and all. I mean, Whittingham gets hired at Michigan after he steps down from Utah. It's just interesting to see that trend. It's like people are gaining appreciation, like it's okay to have an older dude if they're experienced and great coaches.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, people are going to study Indiana as a case study for a long time. I mean, anybody that's not looking in and analyzing how they built their roster, how they make decisions, what role do each person on the staff and their front office take, they're getting behind, because they've clearly set an incredible standard that everybody's going to start chasing. And it's, I would say, really encouraging for the schools that aren't in an unlimited resources capacity, because obviously Indiana, it doesn't necessarily fit that bill, and they weren't operating with the biggest rev share allocation or NIL funds of any school, certainly not the Big Ten, much less nationwide. And they found incredible success, and not just success as if they're getting last second play to go their way. I mean, they're dominating teams, and so I think that they're gonna disrupt the way that people look at things in a significant way, and we need to study it and watch it and understand it closely. And I think you're right, like the young up and comer, vibrant coach that has the appeal. Signetti wasn't that guy. I mean, he was a guy that just was a journeyman, successful, but he paid his dues. And probably a lot of people would have initially said, I don't know if this guy's too young to too old to give the reins of the program to. And clearly, the success has spoken for itself. So I think you got to pay attention to that to figure out what to do. There's probably going to be a little bit of an overreaction, as there often is, where people try to go and fully replicate what they're doing. And I think that in itself can be problematic, because they clearly got a lot of factors at play that probably can't be replicated. But there are lessons to be learned from that case study that certainly I'm watching. I know the rest of the industry is watching as well too.
And now they have Mark Cuban becoming more visible, and so you have this great way that he's constructed a roster, right. And now they're going to throw some money at it as well. Speaking of that, do we have a Mark Cuban? No. How do you grow a deeper base of donors? And what's that been like? Because it's like I bet they're excited to see you, and if they don't know you, a lot of them probably know you from before. So these are fun conversations, because you're kind of and some of them you probably kept in touch with over the years. But I remember it was like every AD kind of has his, okay, these are my people, and then I do feel like some old guard folks maybe felt like, well, they don't come to us anymore. How have you kind of addressed that, in kind of what's your strategy been for trying to get that deeper? Because when I hear people say, we don't have the money, we can't compete with tech. I mean, maybe not right now, maybe like in the portal, not going to compete with them. We're not going to have 20 to 25 million to spend in the portal. But I sort of push back on this idea of like, oh, we don't have enough donors, or we don't have enough money. I always, and you hear about these same people, and like, there are people out there that have done like unbelievably well that really haven't been approached or haven't been involved. How are you trying to maybe build that deeper donor base?
Yeah, well, first of all, we have the constituency and the support necessary to be successful. What we don't have, and what we've got to do a better job, is unifying that community and getting everybody back in the boat, rowing in the same direction. So to make an assessment and say, hey, is there the resources at our disposal to be successful? I don't think that's up for debate. I 100% believe that we've got everything that we need to be successful and more. And I think, again, you look at a school like Indiana as a perfect example of that. As far as my particular approach, I think that's been, I don't want to say the easy part, because there's certainly, it's relationships, and if you care about people, you're intentional about it and you're deliberate. But getting to pick up the phone, and oftentimes I'm driving in between a meeting, I've got 10 minutes in the car, and I've got a list of, I got to give this person a call and just check in, and for me, these calls are, thank you for what you've done for our university, because there's so much that has been accomplished here. But I have no doubt that community, our Baylor family as a whole, will unify and will galvanize and put us in a position to be successful. I do think we've got to acknowledge some of the realities that were on the, that preceded NIL and this new era of college athletics. One, we went through a pretty significant amount of building and capital projects. You think about, we're not much more than 10 years removed from McLean opening and the track facility opening, but Foster opened, Fudge opened as a athletic department, and credit to previous leadership and credit to our donor community and our university leadership for committing. But a lot of money has been raised here over the last few years, and specifically right prior to this new era of NIL. And I also think that there's reality that as we walked up on that edge, we had been fortunate with some success in sports. If you think about national championships on both sides, just prior to this new era, our football team had experienced multiple Big 12 championships and New Year's Day bowls. And so we hadn't been through, I would say, a long window of a lack of success. And I do think some of our peer institutions had probably experienced a longer period of disappointment and had maybe not experienced the level of capital projects. So there wasn't as much donor fatigue. And so those two factors, I think, set them up really well to be a highly motivated and I would say ready fan base to get after it and really attack this new era of college athletics. And I don't want to put the blame externally. We were behind. We've got to. I think that's been admitted before in terms of our mobilization to get after it, and to get the external side of the equation to where it needs to be. But I do think it is important to take a little bit of a historic look to see where we were, and now that we are at where we're at, I will tell you, I clearly think that the resources to go achieve the level of success are available. We got to go earn that trust, and we've got to go tell the story and give people a reason to jump in and support the cause. And that's ultimately, at the end of the day, that's my job. My job is to shape and provide a story and explain the need and give people needs to go jump in and be supportive to help us accomplish our collective goals.
All right. And the morale of the your group that you go in there, and I've read that it was really kind of down, and I'm sure all the stuff that happened with Mac and just the uncertainty. And I mean, I think, the fan base obviously felt one way about it, the people that are inside the building. So I would think in the early days, you had to do some things in the terms of calming some things down. What have you done? What have you kind of seen from your staff? And again, I guess you're also sort of in an evaluation phase, because, you may want to bring other folks in, but how is that going?
Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt. I think you have to acknowledge this place has been through a lot. All of it. Our fans, our coaches, our staff, in our university. It's been a hard few months for sure. And I, as a fan, I can tell you I have a perspective. But these people that live it and call it their job every day, like, there's another layer of emotion associated with it. And so, I think the first thing I needed to do is to understand it and to acknowledge it and learn from it and make a commitment to help position our department moving forward to avoid and to learn from previous challenges and use those as opportunities moving forward. And so all that is true. As far as, the team that we have here, I think there's some great parts that are difference makers in the world of college athletics. I think we've got to add to it. I think there are additional needs that we're actively pursuing to build out the infrastructure to get us to a point where we can be successful. So I would say there's optimism by the group that I'm inheriting, and optimism for me of that group. But there's also a pretty clear understanding that there are skill sets and there are roles that we need to add, and that's part of the current process for what I'm spending most of my time on.
Are you content right now with the way football is set up, with the more and more teams going to NFL models, even getting people with NFL backgrounds? Some GMs at places have quite a bit of authority, and I mean, you kind of get into, okay, who's reporting to who?
Right.
Are you still just in evaluation phase?
Yeah.
Or is that an area you feel like, hey, maybe we need to update some things?
Yeah, I mean, I think as you look at the college athletics as a whole, the titling, as far as the GM role that's being used is I don't think it's reflective of what historically has been the way it's been done in professional sports. The individuals on our staff that have that title really like those guys. I think there's a lot of talent there, whether that be in the sport level or David Kay serves in that capacity more from an administrative standpoint. But as far as the prototypical GM structure that is, I think, seen within the pro sports model, I just don't think that's common in college sports today. And I'm not saying that it shouldn't be, but I would say even those people that have that title, as you assess that in comparison to more of the GM role in pro sports, those people are really making some final calls as it relates to players. A lot of times in the GM capacity, they're building the team, and the coach has, he has some speak-in capacity. Certainly, when it speaks to the style of which they play. A lot of times in pro sports, the coach just gets the team handed to them, and they go coach. They're speaking into it. They're talking about people that they fit their model, but the GM's really building the team, and I don't think that's the common practice in the college space right now. I think the coach, in most every case, has got the final speak into that, and I think Signetti's a perfect example of that. Based on what I've understood and read, he's the GM. He's making the final decision as it relates to the player. And I think that is something that we're going to explore and understand better. The difference between pro sports and college sports is you have multiple programs. And in pro sports, you're dealing with one team, and you're setting up a model with one team that you're having to navigate. In college sports, you've got a handful of different teams that are participating in the rev share environment, where the GM model becomes essential as it relates to player evaluation, and specifically, it's more player evaluation in the pro model. And so I would just answer to say, I like the personnel that we have currently that are doing that for our various teams. As far as what does that look like moving forward, I think there's an evolution for college sports as a whole, but I think for us too, I think we want to have some ways that we approach that that we feel are synonymous with our institution and what fits us best, while also giving our coaches latitude to have the ability to help dictate and speak into structure. So I would just tell you it's a further point for analysis, something I've spent a lot of time on, read, and seeing what other people are doing, studying. To say this is exactly the way that we'll do it moving forward, I would say it's premature for me to give you that prescription.
All right. And then Scott Drew's basketball program, it's been such a huge part of Baylor's identity. You got a commissioner in the Big 12 who loves basketball and really leans into it. And I'll be kind of curious to see what you think of Brett Yormark, and because y'all both, again, he came from a outside, and he's really changed things up and probably done some amazing things for the conference. But just sticking with the Baylor basketball program, first as a fan, and now you're running athletics. The program has slipped over the last 2 years, and while that was fun the other night against Oklahoma State, I do not know if this is a tournament team, and obviously the standard is so high. That's not something anybody's used to. What is your assessment of kind of what's gone on these last 2 years as we've seen this huge change? And obviously Baylor, you talked the other day recently about turning over every rock. Scott's doing that, right? Bringing in James Najee. I saw the story yesterday, and I heard you talking about him the other day. He's a really tremendous young guy. He's probably been thrown into an impossible situation because it's like, everybody's mad at him, and this guy barely has played recently, and so it's just he's in a strange spot. But all that to say, where are you with the basketball program right now? And this has to be twofold. Does more money have to be pumped in, or do we have to kind of reevaluate some of that evaluation process? Because I would say last year they missed huge on a Duke guard. This year's kind of iffy on some players. They don't really have a point guard. Where are you with that program? Because obviously that's something that needs to stay really, really good at Baylor.
Yeah, expectations are high. And don't mistake Scott's, his kindness and his smile for a lack of competitive fire. Because again, kind of talking back to when we spoke about football, nobody's grinding more on himself in that program right now than Coach Drew. I think he'll be the first to acknowledge, roster construction has been a challenge with this one for some variables that he did not have control over. Whether it be losing a player they had built the roster around late in the portal. That happened late, so it really limited the time for him to make up for that. He's dealt with some injuries. Now that mid-season addition, I agree with you, James is a great kid, but he hadn't played really 7 months of up and down basketball, so there's an adjustment there that exists for him. And yeah, I think Scott will be the first to acknowledge it's a great group of guys, and there's some amazing talent over there. But he'd be the first to tell you from a roster construction standpoint, there's a lot of things that he would potentially have done differently had he known what he does today. And I can say, as far as like what are the solutions, I think it's both. I think it's going to take that I've given our department. We need to do all we can to drive revenue and to give him the opportunity to go get the best student athletes he can. But we also need to we got to deliver on the guys. We've got to have really good player evaluations and make sure that the rev share and the money that's spent goes to players who are impactful, because it is difficult to go back to people who are supporting the program or companies that are supporting our program through external NIL opportunities and ask them to continue to do so if they don't see a return on their investment, and they want to see the performance that they think is attributable to that particular player. That's the new era that we live in. In the previous world, there was a little more grace applied when all these guys were on scholarship and somebody comes with a lot of hype and they disappoint. Well, maybe the hype wasn't justified. Now with the way that we're set up and the student athlete benefits that are provided, expectations are higher. And so when someone doesn't meet expectations, there's understandably a greater level, I think, of candor and honesty as far as the ability to get what you need out of them. And that's why I think you see a lot of more transition, because if someone's not delivering, you got to move quick. And so I just say that, listen, I'm optimistic about this team. I think, they needed a little change of scenery. They played two incredibly tough teams in Iowa State and Houston, and Oklahoma State has been a good place for us of late to win. And we got exactly what we need there. I'm excited about the game tonight. I'll be up there. And I think that this team's playing with some momentum and some energy. And, I think they'll play free and loose and kind of with nothing to lose tonight. You win that game, and all of a sudden you've got some momentum coming back. But Scott knows the adjustment he's got to make, and Scott knows the roster construction challenges that he's got to address moving forward. And I would just say I don't think it's a wise bet to bet against Scott Drew. Like I think he knows his what fits here and how to adjust. And the guy has constantly shown his ability to pivot and to take a team. He's got teams that have struggled before that have started really poorly in conference, and he's completely changed the way that they played the game and flipped them into a Sweet 16 team. I remember that team very well that I think started 2-6 in conference, and he flipped it into a Sweet 16 team. So he'll make the adjustments he can within the season, and he'll get to work as soon as the season's over and take his learnings for these last few years, and I think make adjustments. And I think he's in a good spot with clarity as far as what we got to do moving forward, and that involves further support from my seat as well too.
Doug, I appreciate it. I could talk all day with you, and it probably feels like that to you that we already have. But and I have forgiven you, by the way, for going dark on me. I think that should have, when I could not reach you, I think that should have told me that's who it was. They were zeroing in on me, but zeroing in on. So anyway, I was very excited, though. I'm kidding about that. There's something about somebody with institutional knowledge, and not that you have to be a Baylor person to serve Baylor. I'm not like that, but I think that part of it has galvanized the fan base, because it's the whole, hey, he's one of us kind of thing. And so that's a pretty cool thing. And next time, by the way, I'll bring up, I hated not to say anything about it, but the new naming rights in baseball, that's a really nice accomplishment. And I know that comes from relationships that you built over the years in one of your previous gigs, and baseball needs to. Baseball's been great at Baylor in the past, and hopefully there's a path to getting it back there. And last year, what I found out from watching Houston, who was not that great, but they did have like the greatest closer, like in the Big 12, and I thought Baylor actually had a great closer. That wasn't a problem. Yeah. But anyway, I think baseball is going to be. It's just because in the SEC and other places, it's actually becoming a revenue sport. So I don't know if we'll be able to look at it like that. But anyway, congrats on all of that.
Well, thank you. The summary statement to what you just said there is we need to make the next time happen soon. And I'll promise you a regular access and be available. not too much. I know people don't want to hear me too much. They want show me, don't tell me. But
Yeah.
I will tell you personally, I hate not responding. It's one of my my mandates is always be responsive, even if the news isn't good. So apologies for being a little dark for a period of time, because it's not my normal mode of operandi. But appreciate appreciate the coverage, and super grateful for this opportunity. I love our days ahead. I really think that there's a lot of momentum, and we got to fix some stuff. And I understand our fans being frustrated. We haven't won enough of late, fact. But we'll get that going, and enjoyed this time with you, and really look forward to getting more in the future.
All right, that table back there over your right shoulder, that's where I'd like to do that next interview.
Let's go. I don't know. Are you up in Dallas right now? Why don't you come on? Let's come down. We'll finish it up this afternoon.
Fit it part 2.
Let's go. Yeah, you're welcome anytime. We'll do it.
Your staff's they're giving me they don't want that. Doug, thank you, man. It's very congratulations. Very exciting time. I appreciate you being with me.
Fun to visit with you, bud. Appreciate it.
There he goes. Doug McNamee, Baylor Vice President, Director of Intercollegiate Athletics on the Matt Mosley Show. And the Mosley Show, boy, it's been exciting today. We've had portal talk with Chris Hummer. We've had the new athletic director at Baylor. Appreciate Zach for making this work and doing a great job producing for me this morning. Really throughout the day, but tremendous to get Doug McNamee. Lots of things there that he talked about, and some things to certainly we'll be reacting to in the coming days. Tremendous opportunity, and appreciative of Baylor and Brent Ingram, everybody over there for helping put that together. It is the Mosley Show. We appreciate it. That is all we have for this week. Monday at 1:00. Please be with us, because it'll be the day of the national championship game, and then we'll be reacting to divisional playoff weekend in the NFL. Everybody have a great weekend. We'll see you Monday.